Whitman Middle School. This is where I went for 7th and 8th grade. Classic. This is my middle school years. This is where I went to middle school, 7th and 8th grade. And some of my favorite years probably, I think, going to school. Two of my favorite, definitely, 7th and 8th grade. Good years. But in today's video, we're going to be listening to the therapist and learning certain skill sets communication skill sets that we didn't learn from growing up in narcissistic homes with dysfunctional family sets and narcissistic parents, unfortunately. But I hope you listen and learn, and more of your father's history. I'll see you soon. I love you. Hey, I'm out. Let's get some therapy.
My name is Jerry Wise. I want to talk about things people don't realize you're doing because you were raised by a narcissist. Number one, apologizing more than you have to, even if no apology is needed. That's a common problem for ACONs, adult children of narcissists. Number two, hesitating to say no because it might displease others. Again, the difficulty of I just can't say no. If I say no, I'm going to feel guilty. If I say no, they're going to be upset. And I might have you go take a look at the book by Manuel Smith. When I say no, I feel guilty. One of the best books I read early in my recovery. So it's an older book, but it's a very powerful and good book. Thirdly, doubting your own perceptions and second guessing your intuition. We look at our perception, we see what we see, and we go, I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. I'm not perceiving what I think I'm perceiving. That's a common problem. And then with intuition, well, this is what my gut tells me, but, I've been wrong so many times in the past. I just better not trust my gut. I better trust what everyone else is saying. And so we will have that very mushy kind of intuition and our own perceptions. We just don't trust them because we don't trust us and we haven't learned to trust us, which can be done, by the way. Certainly can be done. 4, check in constantly about how someone else feels about you without tending to how you really feel about the person. And that's a common one because our awareness ends up getting reversed. I'm more concerned about what others feel or think about me, and I don't really fully know what I feel or think about them or think about me. That awareness is bracketed and set on the shelf. What I'm interested in is I wonder what they think about me. I wonder how they feel. And we will go into that kind of constant mode of scanning, checking, polling, and we'll try to find out what others think. Because when we grew up with the narcissistic parent, guess what? We better be doing that because it could mean very serious things if we weren't aware of what's going on with mom or dad. So that's very important skill that we learned. It's just we didn't learn the skill about self. We learned the skill about others. So many times when I've talked to people about their relationships, whether partnerships, husband and wife, even relationships with family, I might ask them, well, how do you feel about the other person? Well, they're my husband. Well, how do you feel about your sister? Well, they're my sister. No, I'm not asking you what their role is to you. I'm asking you how you feel about them. You don't like them? You don't like what they do? You don't really feel like you have a lot of love for them? And those kinds of awarenesses are much harder for the adult child of a narcissist to actually ask themselves, what do I think about this other person or think about this relationship? And I think that's becomes a real epiphany moment where they really do realize something when they start going, oh, well, you mean I really can ask myself that and answer that question, because I've been afraid to. So I think it's important that we do that and learn to do that more. Fifthly, picking up on the micro signals of abandonment or displeasure of others. We can read micro signals, we can read very, very subtle forms of abandonment. We can read pre-abandonment, we can read pre-displeasure, because you just have to be such a good reader of other people to survive in a narcissistic home. Sixth, not taking your time to build trust. We tend to be really polarized people when we grew up in dysfunctional families. I talk about that more in the training that I have below, building the real self that you were never allowed to have. That's down below. It's free. You can sign on to that and check that out. And that one of the things that we didn't learn was how to build trust. What's the good timing for that? We'll either be polarized and never trust and never work towards trust, or what's the other side? We jump in with both feet and jump right into the rocky water and hope we don't hit our head in trust, and we just become overly trusting. Maybe we'll even allow the relationship to engulf us. And that's, again, a very almost kind of an incestuous relationship. Can a husband and wife, or a husband and husband, or a woman and woman, can relationships be incestuous? And I think they can be so close. We can call it codependent. There's lots of names we can call, but boy, incestuous is just, you have too much closeness with a relationship that doesn't call for that much closeness. We want to be very careful about working on trust. How do you build trust slowly and genuinely, and not either jumping in or never putting your toe in the water in terms of trust? Because those are the things we learn growing up in a narcissistic home. 7, having a problematic relationship with uncomfortable emotions like pain and rage, either repressing them completely or allowing them to consume us. And again, that ends up being low self-regulation. We're not regulating ourselves very well. Well, when did we learn to regulate ourselves? We didn't if we grew up with a narcissist as a parent. We did not, because they didn't regulate themselves. So how do we know how to do it? No one sent me that memo. I wasn't taught how to do that. I was only taught through displeasure or punishment, and not really talking about feelings or emotions or how human beings really work. But we didn't know that in our family. We either are enraged or we completely repress it. And again, that polarization is something we can learn to grow out of. And I have an online program where I talk about learning to grow out of that polarization, where you're neither totally repressing the anger or you're overly angry. How do we get in the middle where we can have anger, not act it out, but have it and use it constructively? And that's through self-differentiation. And I talk about that in the online program, Your New Road to Self. That's listed below as well. I hope you'll check that out as well. Also, people don't realize we're using normal rules for abnormal relationships. Abnormal relationships are abusive, toxic, enmeshed, triangulated, immature. There's all kinds of unhealthy relationships. And we use normal rules and apply those to that. For example, if a father is abusive, even to their adult child, we will tolerate that abuse because, hey, love your father and your mother, you honor your father and your mother, and you need to be caring and loving all the time. And so we're using normal rules because those are good rules, but not for these abnormal, toxic, or even psychopathic relationships. That's not when we use normal rules. We need to use abnormal rules for abnormal relationships. And I talk more about that in other videos and also in the program that I'm offering. Second of all, using abnormal rules for healthier relationships. So not only do we use normal rules for unhealthy relationships, we use unhealthy rules for healthy relationships. So if someone comes into our life and they're kind of healthy, guess what we're doing? We're doing unhealthy things in that relationship because those are the rules that we know. And so what I work on in helping clients individually when I work with them and in other workshops and programs to reverse that. So we use abnormal rules for abnormal relationships and normal rules for healthier relationships. And that can be done. We also, number 10, navigate relationships without self-definition. In other words, we go into relationship not knowing who we are, not knowing what we want, not knowing where we're going. Again, who am I? What do I like? What do I not like? Oh, where do you want to go eat? I don't know. Where do you want to go eat? Well, do you like Mexican? Well, I can go to Mexican. What do you like Chinese? Yeah, well, I can go to Chinese. What would you like to eat tonight? Even if we don't go there, what would you like to eat? Well, I haven't really thought about that. I mean, there's some things I like, and again, kind of a lack of self-definition we have there. Because I can always say, I like Chinese, but I'm happy to go other places, but I've kind of gotten out of the no man's land of no commitment. I went into, this is what I would like, but I'm open to going other places. And so that's okay. You can still have a self and still negotiate with other people what can be done. Now, there's some things that are not negotiable, and that's more self.
So you can still make a choice, but at the same time be flexible. And I've learned this in just running my business over the last 14 years. Is I make the choice on what time are the ideal times for my schedule to start, but I'm still flexible to customer schedules if there's something that is maybe a little bit outside of that. So I'll offer, I could be there at 11 or 1 p.m. or anytime that works best in the customer's schedule. So that gives them the choice to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go with 11 or I'll go with 1. Or if both of those don't fit, they'll usually respond and say something like, well, is there a possibility that you could come by 4? And then I can accommodate. But that's just giving an example of what he's saying here in terms of just making clear choices, because I used to struggle with that. And this kind of hurt my career at Microsoft when I used to just go along with everything and never make a clear decision or choice or express myself clearly in certain circumstances.
Self-definition that we have. Like when it comes to abuse, I'm not negotiating that one. No, if you're going to be abusive, that is a no-go, period.
That's why I don't talk to my brother Ahmed anymore. It's because I asked him to stop being abusive to me, as well as Michelle. But they continue to be abusive in their communication with me and this controlling kind of, this gangsterism that we need to really grow out of, because we're in our 50s. It's ridiculous.
Period. I do not do abuse. That's a self-definition, and we can learn to be more self-defined. I think this is actually number 12. Navigate life and relationships without a wider view of how relationships work, without a systems paradigm. I think that's what we tend to do that we don't realize we're doing. We don't use a systems paradigm, And so we have a very, very blinder on the eyes perspective to the relationship and to relationships, family, romantic, personal, parenting. It's a very narrow view rather than a much wider view, which gives us more information and much more of a direction as to what we can do or should do to stay healthy and to stay connected with other people. For example, if I have that wider view, then I'll know more how my neediness would affect this relationship. I would also know more how love bombing works in the relationship. That's a more systems view because I want to know how those things work. I want to know what is the purpose of my reactions. What do they create? What do they cause? How do they function in the relationship? And so that's a systems perspective. It adds a lot more information to us being mature adults. But we often don't realize that we don't do that. And that's the last one of the things people don't realize we're doing because we were raised by a narcissist. Because again, if we're raised in a dysfunctional home, we are going to have a very blaming perspective, not a systems perspective. It's going to be much more blaming oriented. It's going to be much more other center oriented. And
Everything's my fault. And that's why I stress that. Everything is my fault. I'm blamed for everything. Everything is my fault. At one point in time, I would take on this blame and be like, oh, I need to do better. But now I understand with therapy that really the issue is that this is just a product of me, for one, growing up in a narcissistic home, and then having a trauma bond and getting into romantic relationships with women who also grew up with narcissistic parents, and that blaming and that systems or level of communication is a common bond that we have. And so as soon as you have a common bond, then you start to react in a way that you're comfortable with, like, because it's what you feel familiar with, because that's how I grew up with my mom. You see what I'm saying? And that's how I communicated with my dad. Oh, that's just how we communicated in our house. And then that becomes the norm when a lot of these things that we grew up with were just unhealthy and not normal. It's not to say that our parents were terrible people. Not everyone knows it all, but there is healthy communication and then there's very unhealthy communication. So I'm here to try to create a balance to help us understand our strengths and weaknesses so we can heal and move forward. But I'm gonna go ahead and close this video out, and I hope you learned something.
And people won't know why are they doing this? Well, because they grew up in a narcissistic home. I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel.